The first tiny handprint appeared in the frost before the blood did. Lena Voss saw it the moment dawn touched the forest floor. 5 perfect little fingers pressed into the thin layer of white covering the earth. Beside them lay another set, slightly larger. Her sons had raced ahead again, pretending to track rabbits through the pines, despite her repeated warnings to stay close. She smiled despite herself. Then she noticed the third trail. Boot prints, heavy, adult, fresh enough that the snow still crumbled around the edges. Someone else had entered their valley. The smile disappeared. She crouched beside the tracks and pressed 2 fingers into one print. The earth beneath remained warm, less than 10 minutes old. Her heartbeat slowed instead of quickened. Panic made people careless. Carelessness buried children. "Finn!" Her voice barely rose above the wind. No answer. "Eli!" Still nothing. The forest had become too quiet. No birds, no squirrels. Even the creek that usually rushed through the valley seemed strangely distant. She reached beneath her cloak and wrapped her fingers around the worn hunting knife she had carried for 7 years. Not because she believed it would save her, because it reminded her what she still had to protect. Another footprint appeared farther ahead, then another. The stranger hadn't tried to hide his trail. He hadn't known children lived here. Or perhaps, he hadn't expected anyone to survive long enough to follow it. A branch cracked. Lena spun. 2 small figures burst from the trees. "There you are," Finn shouted. Both boys stopped the instant they saw her face. They were identical in nearly every way. Dark hair, gray eyes, the same stubborn chin. Only their personalities separated them. Finn rushed toward every mystery. Eli studied it first. "Someone came," Eli said quietly. Lena nodded. "You saw the tracks. We smelled blood." Her heart skipped. "Blood?" Finn pointed deeper into the forest. "Not much, but enough. We thought it might be a deer." Lena looked toward the trees. "No." She sheathed the knife. "You thought it might be someone who needed help." Neither boy denied it. She had taught them that. Never ignore suffering. Never assume the wounded are dangerous. She had never expected those lessons to become this dangerous. "Show me." The twins exchanged a glance, then turned without another word. They moved silently between the trees. Better than most trained scouts. She hated herself every time she noticed it. Children shouldn't learn how to disappear before they learned how to dance. The scent reached her long before the clearing appeared. Blood, fresh, human, mixed with pine sap and wet earth. Finn stopped behind a fallen oak. There, Lena followed his gaze. A man lay half-buried beneath broken branches where he had fallen down the rocky slope. His dark traveling cloak had nearly blended into the forest floor. One shoulder was soaked with blood. His sword rested several feet away, broken. The wound wasn't what caught Lena's attention. His signet ring did. Black steel, a silver wolf, the crest of Blackstone. Every breath left her lungs. No, 7 years. 7 years since she had seen that crest. 7 years since she had fled Blackstone Palace, beneath a storm that had hidden her tears from everyone except the moon. She took one cautious step closer. The man's face remained hidden beneath tangled hair. Finn had already started climbing over the fallen tree. She caught his arm. "Don't. He'll die. I know. We have to help him." "I know." Eli knelt several feet away, studying the ground instead of the stranger. There was another man. Lena looked up sharply. "What?" "Not here now." He pointed toward the churned mud. These footprints circled him. Then they left. She counted quickly. 1 wounded man, 1 healthy hunter. The hunter hadn't finished the job. Why? Her eyes dropped to the stranger again. She carefully brushed wet hair away from his face. Everything inside her stopped. The scar above his right eyebrow, the faint line along his jaw where a blade had grazed him years ago, the face she had spent 7 years trying to forget. Alpha King Cale Ashford, her husband, the father of the 2 boys, standing only a few feet away. Finn looked between them. "Mother," His voice softened. You know him. Lena couldn't answer. She stared at the man she had mourned, while believing he would never stop hunting her. He looked older. The weight of a kingdom had carved itself into his face. New scars crossed his hands. His beard had grown rough. He looked nothing like the proud Alpha King who had stood before thousands during their mating ceremony. He looked tired, very tired. A low groan escaped him. His eyes fluttered but didn't open. One word left his lips. So, soft, she almost thought she'd imagined it. Cold. Finn was already pulling off his own wool blanket. Lena stopped him. Instead, she removed the thick cloak from her own shoulders and gently laid it over Cale. Her fingers paused for only a heartbeat before letting go. Not because she had forgiven him, because no one deserved to die alone in the snow. A raven suddenly exploded from the trees. Then another, then dozens. Eli's head snapped toward the eastern ridge. His face lost all color. We're not alone. Lena followed his gaze. High above them, almost hidden among the pines, a rider watched the clearing without moving. The morning light caught the silver wolf emblem on his armor. Not Blackstone, a different crest, one she had prayed never to see again. The broken crown of House Ashford, the mark of Cale's younger brother, the man who had tried to murder the royal heirs 7 years earlier. And now, he had found them. Before we find out whether Lena can protect her sons from the man who has hunted them for 7 years, subscribe if you enjoy emotional werewolf stories filled with mystery, betrayal, and unforgettable twists. Leave a like and tell me in the comments, what would you do if the only way to save your children was to make them believe their father wanted them dead? Now, let's continue. The rider didn't reach for his bow. He didn't need to. The single silver feather tied beneath his saddle told Lena everything. House Ashford's shadow guard. Only one man still commanded them, Prince Darius, Cale's younger brother, the man who had smiled at her wedding feast while quietly arranging the deaths of children not yet born. Lena dropped to one knee. Finn, Eli, neither boy argued. They instinctively lowered themselves behind the fallen oak. Years of hiding had taught them when questions could wait. The horses, she whispered. Finn nodded once and disappeared into the brush without another word. Eli remained beside her, watching the rider through narrow eyes. He's waiting. I know. Why? Because he isn't hunting us. She looked toward the unconscious Alpha King. He's hunting him. The realization settled over both of them. The rider believed Cale was still alone. He had no idea Lena and the twins had found him first. That ignorance was their only advantage. The rider finally turned his horse and disappeared between the trees. He wasn't leaving. He was calling others. Lena counted silently. 1 scout, then 5, then 20. That was how Darius hunted. Never with one blade. Always with a circle. We're moving, she said. Finn returned, leading 2 sturdy mountain ponies. The cave, Lena hesitated. The cave was safe. Cale would die before they reached it. She looked down at the unconscious man. For 7 years she had imagined this moment, finding him again. She thought she would feel anger. Instead, she felt something much heavier. Questions. Why had Darius hunted his own brother? Why had no one from Blackstone ever found the valley? Why was the Alpha King traveling without a royal guard? Cale stirred again. His breathing had become shallow. The wound on his shoulder continued bleeding despite the cold. Eli crouched beside him. The blade was poisoned. Lena looked sharply at her younger son. How do you know? It smells bitter. He pointed toward the torn flesh. The edges are turning black. She leaned closer. He was right. The poison had already begun spreading. We don't have much time. Finn looked toward the ridge. Neither do we. Another raven burst from the trees, this time from the west. Then another answered from the south. Signals. Shadow guards communicated without speaking. The circle had begun closing. Lena made her decision. Help me. Neither boy questioned it. Together they cut 2 young pine poles. Finn fetched rope woven from mountain vines. Within moments they had built a rough litter. Not elegant, strong enough. As they lifted Kale, his hand instinctively reached outward. His fingers brushed Finn's wrist. The Alpha King's eyes opened only halfway. Clouded by fever, he smiled faintly. "My boys." The words were barely audible. Then he slipped back into unconsciousness. Everything stopped. Finn stared. Lena's throat tightened. He thought. Eli finished the sentence. He thought we were his sons. Neither twin understood why those words had shaken their mother. She forced herself to move. Lift together. They carried the litter into the trees. The forest quickly swallowed every trace of the clearing. Half an hour later, they reached a narrow stream cutting through the valley. Finn stopped suddenly. There, fresh hoofprints crossed the water. Too many to count. Darius's men had already reached the opposite ridge. They were moving faster than she expected. Eli knelt beside the stream. They split. How many? 3 groups. He pointed downstream. One went that way. Another stayed high. The last, he frowned, is following us. Lena looked back. Nothing moved. No sound reached them. Yet she trusted Eli's instincts. He had never been wrong. Leave the stream. They climbed onto higher ground covered with broken stone. Rock concealed scent. It also slowed pursuit. Kale groaned again. His skin had grown unnaturally warm. Lena carefully touched his forehead. The fever had worsened. She reached into her satchel and removed a small leather pouch. Inside rested dried silverleaf, the last of it. She hesitated. Silverleaf cured blood poison. She had spent 3 winters gathering enough to protect the twins, if they were ever injured. If she used it now, there would be none left. Finn quietly placed the pouch back into her hand. You already decided. She looked at him. What do you mean? You decided, the moment you covered him with your cloak. Children noticed more than adults believed. She crushed the leaves into a wooden cup. Added water from the stream. Slowly lifted Kale's head. The Alpha King's eyes opened again. This time, they focused on her, only for a heartbeat. Confusion crossed his face. Lena, he whispered her name, as though speaking to a ghost. A tear escaped the corner of his eye. I searched. His voice disappeared beneath another wave of pain. The cup slipped from Lena's trembling fingers. For 7 years she had believed he wanted her dead. Yet a man preparing to lose consciousness rarely lied. He hadn't said, I found you. He hadn't said, you betrayed me. He hadn't called for soldiers. He had said, I searched. A distant hunting horn shattered the silence. One blast, then another. Closer, much closer. Eli looked toward the northern ridge. They know we're carrying someone. Finn reached for the hunting bow strapped across his back. There are too many. Lena followed the sound. Darius had changed tactics. He was no longer searching the valley. He was driving every path toward a single destination. Toward them. She looked at the narrow mountain pass ahead. There was only one route left, and waiting beyond it stood the place she had sworn never to return. The abandoned border fortress where she had given birth to the Alpha King's twin sons 7 years earlier. Lena hadn't seen the fortress since the night she fled it. Even after 7 years, the mountain still carried the scars. Half the western wall had collapsed into the ravine below. Ivy climbed the remaining stone like slow-moving fingers, hiding broken windows and cracked battlements. A watchtower leaned dangerously over the cliff, yet somehow refused to fall. To everyone else, it was a ruin. To Lena, it was the place where 2 newborn cries had changed the course of her life. Finn shifted the litter higher onto his shoulder. You've been here. It wasn't a question. She nodded. Long ago. Eli studied the fortress. You don't like it? I don't. Then why come? Because no one else would. She looked toward the hidden entrance beneath the fallen tower. Darius had searched the kingdoms for 7 years. He would search villages, forests, caves. He would never waste time on a place everyone believed abandoned. At least, that was what she hoped. Together they carried Kale through a narrow crack hidden behind hanging vines. The passage opened into an underground storeroom. Dry, dark, cold enough to preserve food through winter. She had prepared it years ago. Shelves still held dried herbs, blankets, oil lamps, and clay jars filled with clean water. Finn carefully lowered the litter. Eli immediately examined Kale's wound. The poison spread. I know. The silver leaf slowed it. Not enough. Lena lit an oil lamp. Its warm glow filled the chamber. For the first time she truly looked at Kale. His traveling clothes were torn. Fresh bruises marked his ribs. A deep cut crossed his left forearm. None of those injuries explained why the King of Blackstone had been alone. Kings did not travel without guards. Not unless they betrayed him. She whispered the words without realizing it. Finn looked up. Who? She shook her head. I don't know yet. Kale's hand slowly tightened around the blanket. His fever had grown worse. His breathing came in short, uneven bursts. Eli gently peeled back the torn fabric around the wound. Something metallic caught the lantern light. There. Lena leaned closer. The broken tip of a dagger remained buried inside the wound. She frowned. No, the blade shouldn't have snapped. Finn crouched beside them. The metal is strange. It was. Dark silver, unlike ordinary steel. Lena reached for a pair of narrow forceps. Hold him. The twins obeyed. She gripped the broken fragment and pulled. Kale jerked violently, despite remaining unconscious. The piece finally came free, no larger than her thumb. An unfamiliar symbol had been engraved near the base. A wolf, surrounded by two crossed crowns. Eli stared. I've never seen that crest. Lena had, once, only once, 7 years earlier, on the dagger, carried by the assassin who entered the nursery the night her sons were born. She had killed that man herself. She remembered pulling the same blade from his hand before escaping into the storm. She had believed he acted alone. Now another identical weapon had found Kale. The attacks had never stopped. Someone had hunted the Ashford bloodline all along. Kale suddenly coughed. Blood stained the blanket. Not bright red. Almost black. Lena immediately reached for another pouch. Nightroot, ground willow bark, juniper resin. She crushed the herbs together inside a stone bowl. Finn handed her hot water without being asked. Years of survival had made them a family that moved without words. She carefully poured the mixture between Kale's lips. Most spilled onto his beard. Only a little reached his throat. Still, he swallowed. Minutes passed. The fever slowly began breaking. His breathing steadied. Eli finally relaxed. It worked. For now, a dull thud echoed above them. All three froze. Another. Someone walked across the courtyard. Not one person, several. Finn extinguished the lantern instantly. Darkness swallowed the room. Only thin shafts of afternoon light slipped through cracks in the ceiling. The footsteps multiplied. Armor. Boots. Then voices. They came here. Search every room. Check below. Lena's heart sank. Darius had guessed correctly. A heavy object scraped across the stone floor overhead. Someone was moving the old well, the hidden entrance. Finn quietly reached for his bow. Eli picked up the short hunting spear resting against the wall. Lena slowly drew her knife. The room remained silent, until a familiar voice echoed through the ruined fortress. Calm, confident, dangerously close. Brother, Darius's words drifted down through the broken stone. I know you're still alive. A pause. Then another sentence. I've spent 7 years finishing Father's work. Lena felt every muscle in her body tighten. Father's work. Kale had never spoken of another brother. Never mentioned his father ordering the deaths of his own grandchildren. Above them, Darius laughed softly. You've hidden well. His voice became colder. But blood always leads me home. Kale's eyes slowly opened, clouded by fever, confused. He looked first at the twins standing over him, then at Lena. Recognition struck him like lightning. His voice cracked. Lena, She pressed one finger gently against her lips. "Don't speak." He obeyed. For a long moment he simply looked at the two boys. Neither understood why the wounded stranger suddenly smiled through tears. Then Darius shouted from the courtyard, "Bring me the children alive." Silence exploded inside the hidden chamber. Finn slowly turned toward his mother. "He knows." Lena nodded once. "Yes, he knows exactly who you are." Cale pushed himself upright. Pain immediately drove him back against the stone wall. The effort alone stole his breath. Lena knelt beside him. "Stay down." His eyes never left the twins. "There," his voice broke. "Our sons." It wasn't a question. He already knew. Finn instinctively stepped closer to Eli. Neither boy spoke. For years they had asked about their father. Now the answer sat bleeding only a few feet away. Lena kept her voice low. "We don't have time." Above them, heavy boots crossed the courtyard. Stone scraped against stone. Darius's men were searching every chamber. Cale struggled to focus. "Darius, he knows they're here." Lena nodded. "He called for them by name." "No, but he knows children are hiding with you." Cale closed his eyes for a heartbeat. "Then someone followed me." "You came here on purpose?" He looked at her. "I didn't know it was here." "Then why were you alone?" "I wasn't." His answer surprised her. "My escort betrayed me." Finn frowned. "Your own soldiers?" Cale nodded weakly. "They turned the moment we crossed the eastern pass. They wore Blackstone colors. They carried Blackstone steel. But they answered to Darius." Another loud crash echoed above them. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Someone had entered the fortress keep. Lena looked toward the hidden staircase. "We have minutes." Cale slowly reached inside his torn coat. Lena immediately tensed. Instead of a weapon, he removed a weathered leather map case. "I carried this for 7 years. He handed it to her. "You should have received it." She hesitated before taking it. Inside lay dozens of folded sketches. The first showed her face. The second, another, then another. Each drawing looked slightly older than the last. The dates beneath them stretched across 7 years. Finn looked over her shoulder. "Mother, he was looking for you." Lena unfolded another page. Maps, mountain trails, villages, river crossings. Every place she had ever hidden. Marked, visited, crossed out. One note had been written beneath the final map. "She changes direction every spring. She still avoids Blackstone roads. She is alive." Lena stared at the handwriting. It belonged to Cale. "You searched." His tired eyes met hers. "Every season. I thought—" "I know." He lowered his head. "You believed I abandoned you. You believed I hunted you. I never stopped looking." Before either could say another word, Eli raised one hand. Quiet, everyone froze. A faint scraping sound came from the tunnel leading deeper beneath the fortress. Not above, below. Finn slowly lifted his bow. "Someone's down there." Cale frowned. "There shouldn't be another tunnel." Lena looked toward the darkness. "There is. I found it after the twins were born. I never explored it." The scraping came again, closer, then stopped. A child's voice echoed softly through the stone. "Mother!" Finn's face drained of color. "That's impossible." Eli looked equally shaken. "It sounded like me." No one moved. Again the voice drifted through the darkness. "Finn." This time it sounded exactly like Eli. The brothers looked at one another. Neither had spoken. Cale's expression hardened. "Darius." Lena frowned. "What?" "He used them before." "Used who?" "Children." His voice became cold. "When we were young, he trained spies to imitate voices." Another crash thundered above. Someone shouted, "I found the old well!" The hidden entrance. They were running out of time. Lena quickly rolled the maps and tied them back inside the leather case. She looked at Finn. "You know the western escape." He nodded. "Eli, the ridge trail." "I know." She turned toward Cale. "Can you stand?" He tried. This time he managed. Barely. Finn quietly slipped beneath Cale's arm to help support him. The Alpha King looked down in surprise. "You don't have to," Finn answered without looking up. "Mother says we don't leave wounded people behind." The words struck Cale harder than any blade. His son had inherited compassion before ever knowing his father. Another shout exploded overhead. "They're below!" Stone cracked. Sunlight spilled through a widening gap in the ceiling. A spear thrust downward, missing Eli by inches. Lena didn't hesitate. "This way." She pulled open a narrow wooden door hidden behind stacked barrels. Cold air rushed from the darkness beyond. One by one they slipped inside. The passage twisted sharply before descending beneath the mountain. Behind them, the storeroom door burst open. Darius's soldiers flooded into the chamber. They found blankets, a dying fire, fresh footprints, but the fugitives had already disappeared. The captain knelt beside the discarded herbs. He smiled. "They're close." Above the fortress walls, Darius slowly looked toward the western mountains. Then he gave the order that chilled even his own men: "Burn the fortress." "If they won't come out." His smile never reached his eyes. "We'll bring the mountain down on them." Flames climbed the broken walls before the family reached the end of the passage. Smoke chased them through the narrow tunnel, carrying the sharp scent of burning timber and old stone. Dust drifted from the ceiling with every explosion above. Finn glanced back once. "They're collapsing the fortress." "They don't care if they bury their own soldiers," Eli said. "They never did," Cale answered quietly. His voice remained weak, but every step grew steadier. The herbs had slowed the poison, though his shoulder still throbbed beneath the bandages. The passage finally widened into a natural cavern. A cold underground river cut across their path. Lena stopped. "This wasn't here before." Cale knelt beside the water. "No, it wasn't." Fresh footprints covered the muddy bank. At least a dozen men had crossed recently. "They're ahead of us," Finn whispered. Eli shook his head. "No." He pointed toward the opposite bank. "They're waiting." The boy's words had barely settled when an arrow struck the stone beside Cale's head. The cavern erupted into chaos. "Down!" Lena shoved the twins behind a boulder. 3 more arrows flew from the darkness beyond the river. Cale pulled Lena behind cover just before another shaft shattered against the rock where she had been standing. "They knew about the tunnel." "No," Cale replied. They guessed. He studied the cavern. The attackers hadn't advanced. They were trying to trap them between the burning fortress and the underground river. Darius wanted them alive, at least the twins. Cale looked toward Finn. "How well do you shoot?" Finn quietly lifted his hunting bow. "I don't miss." Cale almost smiled. "Neither did your grandfather." Lena looked sharply at him. "We're not talking about family history right now." "No," he nodded. "We're surviving it." Another arrow skipped across the river. Eli frowned. "They're wasting arrows." "What do you mean?" "They're aiming high." Cale looked again. The boy was right. The arrows weren't meant to kill. They were measuring distance. A trap. Cale's eyes lifted toward the cavern roof. Thousands of thin stone spikes hung above the river. Stalactites. One good impact. "They're bringing the ceiling down." The sentence had barely left his mouth when a heavy crossbow fired from the darkness. The thick bolt struck a massive stone column supporting the cavern roof. A crack echoed overhead. Then another. "Run!" Cale didn't wait. He grabbed Finn's shoulder while Lena pulled Eli toward the narrow ledge beside the river. Behind them, the cavern exploded. Stone crashed into the rushing water. The underground river surged over its banks. A wall of freezing water rushed through the tunnel. Finn slipped. Cale caught him before he fell into the torrent. For one terrifying second, father and son stared at each other. Neither spoke. There wasn't time. Together they climbed the ledge as the flood swallowed the path behind them. The attackers weren't as fortunate. Several cries echoed from the collapsing cavern. The rushing water carried men, weapons, and shattered stone into the darkness below. Silence followed. Only the river remained. Lena counted quickly. Finn, Eli, Cale. Everyone was alive, for now. Hours later, they emerged onto a narrow mountain ridge overlooking the Blackstone Valley. The sight stopped all four of them. Smoke rose from dozens of villages, not from burning homes, from signal fires. Every watchtower across the kingdom carried the same message. The Blackstone wolf had fallen. Cale stared in disbelief. Darius! Lena followed his gaze. He already declared you dead. Cale slowly nodded. If the kingdom believes I'm gone, he'll crown himself. Finn looked toward the distant capital. So everyone thinks he's the Alpha King now. Cale's expression darkened. No. If you're enjoying the story so far, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Leave a like if you're hoping this family finally gets the reunion they deserve. And tell me in the comments, after learning the truth, would you forgive Cale, or would 7 years of silence be impossible to forget? Let's see what happens next. He'll make sure they never learn otherwise. A rider suddenly appeared on the northern trail, then another, then 3 more. All wore Blackstone colors. Lena instinctively reached for her knife. Cale raised a hand. Wait. The riders slowed as they approached. Their leader dismounted first, an older warrior with a scar running across his nose. The moment he saw Cale, his knees hit the ground. My king! Relief filled his voice. We thought you were dead. Cale helped the man to his feet. How many still stand with us? The captain hesitated. Not enough. Darius controls the palace, the council, the royal guard, and... He looked toward the twins. He announced that the royal heirs died 7 years ago. Silence settled over the ridge. The captain's eyes finally rested on Finn and Eli. Something in their faces caught his attention. The same gray eyes, the same jaw, the same expression Cale wore whenever he faced impossible odds. His voice became barely a whisper. My king. Cale nodded once. They live. The captain looked at the twins again. Then, without hesitation, he dropped to one knee before them, not because they were children, because they were the rightful heirs of Blackstone. Far below, the palace bells began ringing, not in celebration, in proclamation. Darius's coronation had begun, and the only people who could stop it were standing on a forgotten mountain with less than 20 loyal wolves at their side. The captain remained on one knee. No one told him to rise. The mountain wind carried the distant toll of the palace bells across the valley. Each solemn note marked another step in Darius's coronation. Cale looked toward the capital. We're out of time. The captain stood. My king, there are 18 wolves still loyal to your oath. 18? Darius imprisoned the rest. And the council? They believe you murdered the crown prince. Silence followed. Finn frowned. There wasn't another prince. The captain's expression darkened. There wasn't. He created one. Lena looked sharply at him. What are you talking about? The captain swallowed. 3 days ago, Darius announced that your majesty fathered another son after the queen disappeared. Cale's eyes narrowed. A lie. Yes. He presented a boy before the council. Eli spoke for the first time in several minutes. Not a real prince. The captain nodded. A frightened orphan. Dressed in royal clothes, Darius declared him the last surviving heir. Lena felt her stomach tighten. So if Cale dies, the throne passes to a child Darius controls. Exactly. Finn looked toward the distant palace. So everyone thinks we're dead, and another boy has taken our place. Cale rested one hand on Finn's shoulder. Not by choice. The boy nodded. I know. The captain unfolded a weathered map across a flat stone. Darius expected anyone loyal to your majesty to attack the palace. So he turned it into a fortress. Red markings covered every entrance. Archers, barricades, guard towers. They're waiting for an army. Cale studied the map. We don't have one. Lena noticed something different. What about here? She pointed toward an old drainage tunnel beneath the eastern wall. The captain smiled faintly. It collapsed years ago. Did anyone check? No. They assumed the river buried it. Lena looked toward the valley. They assumed wrong. Everyone turned toward her. When I escaped 7 years ago, she traced the tunnel with one finger. I didn't leave through the western gate. I crawled through the eastern drainage channel. The captain blinked. It was still open? It was. Kale slowly looked at her. You escaped through the palace itself. I had no choice. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Kale quietly said, "You saved them." She met his eyes. "I couldn't save everyone." "No." His voice remained calm. "But you saved our sons." Neither Finn nor Eli interrupted. For the first time, hearing those words felt less strange. The truth had finally been spoken aloud. A scout burst through the trees. "My king, what is it? The coronation has begun." "Already?" "They're moving faster than expected." The scout hesitated. Darius announced something else. "What?" "He declared that if anyone brings him proof, the missing twins are dead." The young wolf lowered his head. "He'll grant them any title they ask." A heavy silence settled over the ridge. Every loyal wolf understood what that meant. The hunt was no longer political. It had become profitable. Kale rolled up the map. "We won't fight a war today." The captain looked surprised. "We won't?" "No. We're ending one." He pointed toward the drainage tunnel. "We enter quietly. We expose the lie. If the kingdom sees the true heirs alive, Darius loses the throne before a sword leaves its sheath." Finn grinned. "So we don't need an army." Kale looked at him. "We need courage." Eli folded the map carefully. "And proof." Lena smiled for the first time since the forest. "We have both." The sun climbed higher above the valley. Below them, thousands gathered before Blackstone Palace to witness the birth of a false king. None of them knew the true Alpha King was already descending the eastern mountain. Walking beside him were the woman everyone believed had betrayed the crown, and the twin sons everyone believed had died before they ever drew their first breath. The eastern drainage tunnel smelled exactly as Lena remembered. Cold water trickled along the worn stone floor. Moss clung to the walls where sunlight hadn't reached in decades. The ceiling forced even Kale to lower his head as they moved through the narrow passage. No one spoke. Every sound mattered now. Ahead, Captain Ronan raised a clenched fist. Everyone stopped. 2 palace guards stood beyond the rusted iron grate, sealing the tunnel's exit. "They never repaired it," Lena whispered. "They only locked it." Kale studied the old bars. "They expected the mountain to do the rest." Finn leaned toward Eli. "The hinges are rusted. They'll squeal. Not if we lift first." The twins exchanged a glance. Without waiting for instruction, they crouched beside the grate. Finn slipped a flat hunting knife beneath the lower hinge. Eli supported the weight with both hands. Slowly, carefully, the grate lifted free without making a sound. Captain Ronan stared. "Who taught them that?" Lena answered quietly. "Life." One by one, they slipped into the forgotten cellar beneath Blackstone Palace. Above them echoed muffled voices. Music. Applause. The coronation had already begun. Kale looked toward the stone ceiling. "We're late." "No," Lena replied. "We're right on time." They climbed a narrow servant staircase. The palace felt different. The halls that once bustled with servants now stood guarded by armed soldiers every few corridors. Darius trusted no one. Fear had turned his own home into a prison. A young kitchen maid nearly screamed when she rounded the corner. She froze. Her tray crashed onto the floor. The cups shattered. She stared at Kale. "My..." Tears filled her eyes. "My king." Kale raised one finger to his lips. She nodded immediately. "I never believed them." Her voice trembled. "They said you betrayed the kingdom." "I couldn't." She looked toward the twins. Then back to Lena. Understanding spread across her face. "They're alive." Lena smiled gently. "They are." The maid quickly pointed toward the grand hall. Darius dismissed most of the old staff. But Lady Miriam is still there. She refused to leave. Kale's expression softened. "She survived. She kept saying you'd come home." The girl hurried away before anyone else appeared. Captain Ronan smiled faintly. Hope spreads faster than lies. Together, they reached the final corridor. Beyond the enormous oak doors waited the grand hall. Darius's voice echoed through the chamber. And so, by blood and by law, the future of House Ashford is secured. Applause followed. Kale looked toward Lena. This ends today, she nodded. No more hiding. Finn quietly adjusted the simple cloak covering his shoulders. Eli did the same. Neither looked frightened, only determined. Kale rested one hand on each boy's shoulder. I'm sorry. Both twins looked up. For what? Finn asked. For the years I lost, Eli answered. Before Lena could. We all lost them. Kale swallowed hard. You're kinder than I deserve. No. Lena stepped beside him. They're the sons you never had the chance to raise. The words settled between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Only truth. Captain Ronan pushed open the great doors. The music stopped instantly. Hundreds of nobles turned. The crown slipped from Darius's hands. It struck the marble floor with a sharp metallic ring. For one long heartbeat, no one moved. All walked forward first. Not hurried, not angry. Every step echoed through the silent hall. I believe, his calm voice carried across the chamber, that coronation belongs to someone else. Gasps swept through the nobles. Several council members rose so quickly, their chairs overturned. Darius recovered first. His smile returned. Slow, confident. You've become difficult to kill. Kale stopped halfway to the throne. You've become exactly the man Father feared you would become. Laughter echoed from Darius. You still don't understand. He looked toward the gathered nobles. My poor brother. He thinks this kingdom needs truth. He spread both arms toward the crowd. It needs certainty. No one answered. Then Darius's eyes settled on the two boys standing beside Lena. For the first time, his confidence cracked. The color drained from his face. He took one involuntary step backward. No, that's impossible. Finn quietly removed his hood. Eli did the same. The resemblance to Kale became unmistakable. Gray eyes, dark hair, the same determined expression. Lady Miriam covered her mouth with trembling hands. My princes! Tears streamed freely down her face. One by one, the oldest members of the court rose to their feet. Not because Kale had returned, because the true heirs stood before them. Darius looked desperately around the chamber. Guards! No one moved. That's an order! Still no one moved. Captain Ronan stepped into the center of the hall, then removed his sword. Not to attack. He laid it on the marble floor before Kale. One after another. Every loyal guard did the same. Steel rang across the hall. The sound continued until dozens of swords lay between the throne and the returning king. The silence that followed was louder than any battle cry. Darius finally understood. He hadn't lost because his brother survived. He had lost because the truth had arrived before fear could speak again. Darius's smile disappeared. For the first time in years, he stood alone. Not because every soldier had abandoned him, because every lie had. His gaze swept across the grand hall, searching for one face willing to stand beside him. The council, the royal guard, the nobles who had cheered only moments earlier. None met his eyes. Kale climbed the final steps to the throne. He didn't sit. Instead, he picked up the fallen crown. The silver circlet bore a fresh dent where it had struck the marble. He looked at it for a long moment, then carried it to the council table. Not the throne, the table. Every noble noticed. Every noble understood. Lena noticed it too. Kale wasn't reclaiming power. He was restoring order. Darius laughed. A hollow sound. So that's it. You walk through the doors with two boys and everyone forgets 7 years. Kale faced him calmly. No, no one is forgetting. We're finally remembering. Darius's eyes flashed. You still think this kingdom survives on truth? It survives because someone is willing to make impossible choices. Kale nodded once. You're right. It does. But those choices should never belong to one frightened man. The words struck harder than an accusation. Darius's expression changed. For a heartbeat, Lena saw not a prince, but the youngest son, who had grown up beneath impossible expectations. "Our father chose you," his voice cracked. "He always chose you. You were stronger, you were wiser, you inherited everything. And what was left for me?" Silence settled over the hall. Even Kale didn't interrupt. "I spent my entire life living in another man's shadow," Darius continued. "When father died, I knew exactly what would happen." He looked toward the twins. Then they were born. The perfect heirs. "The kingdom would never need me." Finn frowned. "So you tried to kill babies?" Several nobles lowered their heads. The question sounded simple. Its answer was unbearable. Darius looked at the boy. "I convinced myself I was saving the kingdom." "No," Lena spoke quietly. "You were saving yourself." Those words landed with finality. Darius closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't argue. Captain Ronan stepped forward. "My king." Kale looked at him. "The order of judgment awaits." Every kingdom followed the same ancient law. A ruler accused of treason answered before the High Council. Not before an executioner. Kale nodded. "He'll have his hearing." Several nobles looked surprised. One finally spoke. "Your Majesty, he hunted you. He murdered loyal guards. He nearly destroyed the kingdom." Kale answered without raising his voice. "And if we ignore our own laws because we're angry," he looked toward the throne, "then he has already won." The room fell silent again. Two guards approached Darius. He didn't resist. As they led him away, he stopped beside the twins. "You look like him." Finn answered honestly. "So do you." For the first time in many years, Darius smiled without bitterness. Then he disappeared through the great doors. Hours later, the palace balcony overlooked a courtyard filled with thousands of waiting citizens. Word had spread faster than the bells. The Alpha King lived. The princes lived. The queen had never betrayed the kingdom. Kale stepped onto the balcony. The cheering began immediately. He raised one hand. Gradually, the crowd became quiet. "I have stood before you many times." His voice carried across the square. "I've spoken of victory. I've spoken of strength. I've spoken of protecting this kingdom." He paused. "I failed." No one expected those words. "I failed to protect my own family. I failed to see betrayal growing inside my own house. I failed to find my sons." He looked toward Lena. "But others succeeded where I failed." He beckoned her forward. Lena hesitated, then stepped beside him. Finn and Eli joined her. Kale smiled proudly. "The courage that protected Blackstone." He rested one hand on each boy's shoulder. "Did not wear a crown. It lived in a mother who chose her children over a throne." The square erupted into applause. Lena looked over the sea of faces. 7 years ago, she had fled this palace, believing she would never return. Now she stood here by choice, not because fear had ended, because hiding had. As the cheers echoed across Blackstone, the first snow of winter began to fall. Tiny white flakes drifted through the palace courtyard. Finn laughed as one landed on his nose. Eli quietly caught another in his hand. Lena watched them. 7 years earlier, she had watched their first footprints disappear into fresh snow while praying no one would ever find them. Today, their footprints would be seen by an entire kingdom. She no longer feared that. The story had begun with 2 little handprints hidden in the frost. It ended with those same hands held high before a kingdom that finally knew their names. If this story moved you, subscribe for more werewolf stories, leave a like, and tell us in the comments, if you were Lena, would you have hidden the twins for 7 years, or trusted the Alpha King with the truth? We'll see you in the next story.